Good morning.
Yeah, how much did he pay to be a lazy?
Right by your hand. No, no. Put your hand down. Next row. Next row. Okay. Yesterday was the 7th, right? Yeah.
Yeah, today's the 8th.
All right. We got a couple.
You know,
We got a couple to pick up on, and then.
I'm already.
Okay, I'm going to start off with our learning sponsors. Anyone who needs to get their coffee, cookies, etc. Go ahead. Okay. Learning sponsors, A Year of Learning by the Friends of Nina Monester, Nechama Asna Bad Yitzchak Aharon, many friends of Stephen Vigdal, Ezech Nishmat Simcha Melech Ben Meir Leib Halevi, friends of Marcy Kurtz in memory of her great niece, Leah Bracha Bas Rivka, Isaac and Evelyn Blachor in memory of his sister, Chaya Rachel Bas Isser. Then we have a month of learning by Mark Linder in memory of his mother, Yonah Bat Zalman Leib, by Rabbi Isaac Schmerler in memory of his wife, Menya Sima Bat Yitzchak Isaac, friends of Marilyn Schmerler in her memory, Menya Sima Bat Yitzchak Isaac. We have a week of learning by Alan Blumenfeld in memory of his father, Gershon Ben Achaver Pinchas Kohen, by David Mindel Cheslow, in memory of his mother, Bela Bat Meir, Sam and Shifra Coleman, in memory of his father, Yaakov Ben Shmuel. Then on Shabbos, we had a day of learning by Susan and Fred Koss, in memory of her father, Chaim Moshe Yosef Ben Yakim Aryeh. And yesterday, Sunday, we had a day of learning plus Torah fund by the Friends of Barbara Hollander in honor of her 90th birthday, and by Larry Friedman on the occasion of the milestone birthday of his mother, Barbara Hollander. Okay, and that is it. Also, we're saying Refuah Shlema for those in the hospital and elsewhere, and for Peretz Semach Ben Yaakov Yitzchak. Shema's having Aliyah, Crank Rafia, Velp Yeshua, Shema Tliya, Lachol B'nai Israel, a good Geben Shtia. Okay. So Rabbi Kranzler comes over to me and he says yesterday, "Where are you in the Daf?" And I said to him, we are where we're supposed to be. I said, as of Monday morning, we'll start Monday morning's Daf. I said, oh, he said, you went ahead. I said, yeah, if you can call it that way. So I will admit to everyone that I prepared this Daf on Friday morning, given the situation with the Tisha B'Av, etc. So if I'm not at my best, you'll understand. I've always got Ruvain here to help me out, right?
Yes.
Among others. Okay.
Ruvain did do from Zoom.
No. All right, so I want to go back, all right, to we'll go back to the very bottom of 32B, whatever it's going to be, an article, B4, B3, B4, right? Yeah. Okay. All right, B3? Okay, thank you. Okay, so 32. All right, so we're either going to start down here or over here. Okay, gotta find the right place, all right?
Yeah, thanks, Rabbi.
Okay. All right, so what are we dealing with in this Gemara that we haven't looked at in 2 days, right? Remember, we were dealing a lot with the issue of testifying. Then from there, we went on to some other issues. Right, and exactly, that was the next one. If somebody is guilty of two different transgressions, the fact that we see that the greater one takes precedence normally, and we saw some examples of that. And then towards the end of this Amud, excuse me, okay, okay, so the question comes up then, what was the basis? How could we argue that if it's a situation where we see both malchus and money are expected, how did they derive that particular view? Okay, and we saw there was a difference of opinion between Rabbi Yochanan, who were on the one hand, and Ula, I believe it was, on the other. Right? So that's where the Gemara was taking us. Okay, and basically, how did they try to present it? Okay, towards the bottom of that Amud. Okay, it says there, Chaver b'chavero nami, dichtiv ka'asher asa ken yaseh lo, ken yinaten bo, lamali, davar sheyesh bo nitina. Something that can be given, passed from one to the another. Do we need to look for another daf? Umay nihu, and what is it? Mamon. Okay, so I'm on the very last line now, whereas I'm going to start of 32b, 32b, whatever it is. Okay, okay, so it starts off with Rabbi Yochanan. Try the top of the next page.
Oh, is it here?
Right?
Here?
Yeah. Okay, you're looking for another Gemara? Yeah. Okay. This one is out. What about that one over there?
You don't need it anymore. You right? Every word, you understand every word without the
Okay. All right. So now we're ready. We're now ready to show what proof is there, because we're asking what was Rabbi Yochanan's perspective. My tama la'omar ka'ula. What was the reason that he didn't give the same rationale that Ula did? Okay. Im Kain. So the Gemara now tells us, if Rabbi Yochanan had said like Ula, what would be the result? Im Kain bitalta ervat achotcha lo tigaleh. You would then nullify the prohibition of the nakedness of your sisters you shall not uncover. Okay? So if he had used the now we're on Lamed Gimel, which is today's daf, right? Okay, 33A1 or whatever the number is there, and right? Chovel b'chavero nami. Well, maybe he could have learned it based on the argument, okay, of striking one's neighbor.
Like you're chayiv money and
Okay.
you're chayiv money.
That therefore, right, again, an example of being chayav both.
Right.
Okay, from that example.
Right.
In Cain, if that's the case, says the Gemara, bitalta lo Yosef, pen Yosef, then you would do away with the issue of malchus. Okay, and an example there in Dvarim, which says, if you were right, ye shall not exceed lest he exceed. That was the case. That's in regards to the chayiv of malchus. Okay, another example. Okay, Ula had said, what about Edim Zomamim as the example, right? Edim Zomamim Nami. Okay, what about deriving Rabbi Yochanan? Why didn't he derive it from that case? Im Kain bitalta v'haya im ben hakod harasha. Okay, then you would be doing away with another prohibition. Okay, and that was about the guilty man deserves to be beaten. Right? So what happens? Ela edim zomamim Efshar lekiyuma beben grusha uben chalutza. Okay, so maybe, says the Gemara, it's able to say Rabbi Yochanan could have used the Edim Zomamim example because there's still a way to maintain it in the example of someone who testifies falsely about an individual being the son of a divorcee or the son of a chalutza. Well, we'll see. Chovel b'chaveiro nami ika lekiyuma. And in regards to the example of one striking a neighbor, injuring a neighbor, also you might be able to maintain this argument, okay? Kigon shehikahu haka'a she'ein ba shave pruta. Because maybe he wounded him in such a way that the amount of money that would be required to pay, forget whether it's damages and all these other things. Okay, remember the 5 different elements, busha, etc., right? Okay, all right. So in all those examples, it wouldn't be worth a pruta. Okay, achotonami. Okay, now let's apply it to our case, all right, where we talked about the situation of his being involved sexually with a sister, rape in that case. Ika lekayuma ba'achoto bogeret. Maybe there I would say, fine. I might argue that that would be true in a situation if she was the rape of a sister that was between 12 and 12 and a half. Right?
No,
and
that's
that,
a Naira. She's over.
no, it says Bulgarit.
Bulgaris is over 12 and a half.
Right. Okay, so maybe I could keep it there, but now Rabbi Yochanan is going to argue with that. Amar lach Rabbi Yochanan. Okay? Says Rabbi Yochanan, hi, tachat asher ina. Okay? Me buy it, all right? But that, he says, won't work in that case. Why? Mi baye leilikita abaye. Why? Because he needs that example, right? That pasuk for a different purpose, right? Namely, to substantiate a view that Abaye is now going to share with us. Da amar Abaye emar kra, tachat asher eina. Okay, where does it? So the question is, where we're going to get to? Where does he get the halacha of Abaye in a moment? Okay, Rabbi Yochanan, right? So in other words, based on that, Hai tachat asher ina miklal deika boshet upagam. So Abai is going to argue, even if you had to pay, if it's less than a pruta, the actual injury, there's still other elements that one would have to pay for, namely boshet, embarrassment, and pagam, the however we translated it before, remember, was
lessening or
the
value.
devaluation, right? All those things, degradation, things like that. Okay. So the Gemara says, okay, so that was the view of Ula, that there would still be other pay necessary. Okay, in that situation. Okay. So therefore you might theoretically think you require both. But Ula, remember, was the one who said, okay, if you have Malchus, you don't pay, and if you pay, you don't have Malchus. That was Ula's position. Rabbi Yochanan held differently. So coming back now. Let's see, right? Ve'ula nafka leimi derabba. But Ula derives this view of what Abaye had from a statement of Rava. Da amar Rava amar kra, v'natan ha'ish hashochev ima la'avi hana'ara chamishim kasef. Okay, that the person who lies with the woman has to pay her father 50 pieces of silver, 50 shkolim.
12 and a half?
Okay.
She get it if she's older?
Wait a second. Remember that the Gemara says, made a question, what happens if she's a yatoma?
She's
What?
Yatoma. She's an orphan. She doesn't have a father. Well, we're going to get to that too. Okay, so let's say number one, she's an orphan. Okay, if she's still a na'ara and she's an orphan,
It should really go to the father.
it should really go to the father, but then it doesn't because there's no father, so then it would go to her. If she's not a na'ara, now we get to your point. Now you get to your point, Sid. And if she's not a na'ara and she's a bogeret, okay, what happens? Right? That's your question.
No.
She doesn't get.
What's an Ara and a Bogat?
Na'ara is a girl between 12 and 12 and a half. A bogeret is a girl over 12 and a half who's already shown physical signs of maturation.
Right.
Okay? So in other words, we've said before, if it's a bogeret, that's like a more like an adult. It's almost like a situation of seduction. Seduction, the assumption was that it was not against her will. And oh, then it's a different situation.
So that's what I'm asking.
Okay, so if it's the situation of bogeret and it's considered like seduction, then they don't get any money. Okay, if it's a situation of a bogeret and it's like an adult, okay, and she would get, and it's not by cooperation, let's put it that way. All right, then the question is, shouldn't she get the money? That's your question, right? Let's see if the Gemara addresses it.
She's an orphan.
Okay, if an orphan, it's different. Then automatically she should get the money. Okay, we could have a different question about that. Okay.
Therefore, he should get Risa.
All right, so we see there's a number of possibilities, right? There are a number of possibilities. Okay, so what's going to happen? Okay, so what happens? Oh, but wait a second. That's why I said, let's go on in the Gemara. Okay, Hana Achriva. Wait a second, he benefited from it. Okay, Chamishim, he would have to pay. So he has to pay. The question of base it on Sid's point is to whom? Okay, Miklau de Ika Boshet Upagam. Nevertheless, he would have to pay her because there's still Boshet Upagam. Okay, so that would be the implication, says the Gemara, that in this case, if we are dealing with a bogeret, there could still be Boshet Upagam that he would have to pay her. That's what it's. Right. Okay. Right.
Nobody knows it.
Right. Well, that's the point. So the Gemara stops there to go on to another issue. Okay, we tried to prove these issues, this question of dual transgression, dual punishment. Okay, that's what we're still dealing with. Okay, Rabbi Elazar Omer, Edim zomamim, mamona mishalme, umilka lo lake. So according to Rabbi Eliezer, he says, from the example of Edim Zomamim, we would get the fact that they would be required to pay money, but they would not get lashes. They would not get flogging. Okay, which we said, remember, was the same view as Ula. Okay, all right. Okay, so what happens? Mishum dela b'nei hatra'amin. His argument, Rabbi Eliezer, is because they're not warned. Okay, so our next question is going to be, should come to our minds, how or when do you warn somebody regarding Edim Zomamim? Are you going to warn them at the beginning before they give their testimony? Do you warn them during their testimony? What happens if you didn't warn them till after their testimony? Okay, so those are the three possible times that I could think of when you might try to warn Edim that might be Zomamim. Let's go on now. Amar Rava, Teda Natre Baho Emat. He says, you should know at what point do you give them this warning. Natre Baho Meikara. If we say that we warn them initially, Amre Ishtalin, they can say we forgot. Nitre Baho Bishat Maaseh. Should we say that we warn them during the course of their testimony? Right? Parshe velo misade. Maybe they're going to leave and they'll never give any testimony whatsoever. Netre Baho Levasof. Shall we warn them at the end? Maida Hava Hava. What was. They gave their testimony already. Okay? Matkifla Abaye. And so Abaye challenges Rabbi Eliezer in this point. Vinitre Baho B'toch Kadei Dibur. Shall we warn them, or let us warn them in the course of their statement? Okay. Matkifla Rav Acha.
After the end of the statement within Kadei Dibur, which is like three.
Right. In other words,
Shalom Aleichem Rebbe. Is the shear of
at some point,
when they finish,
they've begun making their statement, and then you say something to them. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So Rav, what happens? Matkifla Rav Acha Bereda Rav Ika. Again, a challenge. V'nitre Bahome Ikara. Let us warn them at the outset. V'nirmaz Baho Remuse. And then we'll give them some sort of a hand signal or a.
Don't do it.
Okay. All right. Wag the finger at them, whatever you want to say. Okay. Hadar Amai Abaye. And so Abaye comes back and responds, Lav miltihi da amre. That's not the thing that we're saying. Isa kadatach edim zomamim strichim hatra'a. If it's going to be your opinion that you think that potential edim zomamim need a warning, ki lo matrinan baho, lo katlinan laho. If we don't warn them, we can't kill them, right? Because remember, what was the whole position of Edim Zomamim, the whole Haskam at the end? Okay, you do to them what they intended to do to the person they've testified against. And if it's a capital case, and he would be guilty of being punished with murder, they would get that punishment, right? So what happens? Mi ika mide the inhu ba'ul katil below hatra'ah. Is there some statement or deed or thing in which they would be required to be killed without warning? Ve'inhu ba'u hatra'ah. But they require warning. Ha ba'ina. Why? Because we say, in other words, citing the pasuk that the Torah tells us, va'asitim lo kasher zamam la'asot la'achiv, that you do to them, to him, okay, in other words, the aid, right? Zomamim, which they intended to do to the other person, to the brother. Veleka, and therefore you wouldn't be able to do it. Matkifla Rav Sama, Bereda Rav Yirmiyah. So Rav Sama now challenges, Eleme Ata ben Grusha u ben Chalutza. But maybe from here, where we had the example of a ben Grusha u ben Chalutza, where we said then we could maintain, okay, a punishment, since Edim Zomamim might lie about that person's status, okay, we could still punish them. Delo mika asher zamam, because that's not exactly the situation of doing to them what they intended to him. There would only
the other
be,
Adam,
right. You can't make them a grusha or a chalutza, whatever, right? But you can punish them, if I remember, money,
with Malchus.
right, or malchus, right? Okay.
He doesn't get both.
So far, we don't see anyone who says both.
You can't kill him.
Right.
Depends on what
Said
they
some
say.
people
Right?
rather get
If they
their
want-
That's
if
only
they
in a
want the
capital
person
case.
that he murdered
You'd kill him.
somebody,
Okay?
then they'll get reason.
But so far, we don't see anyone again. That Ula, we says, if you have the two, you do one and not the other. Okay? Rabbi Yochanan reversed it. Okay? So now we're going to go on. Mikasher zamam kamit rabbe. But that's, as we said, the due to them, that was what included lebae hatra'ah. That's why we need some sort of warning. Amar kra.
Going through the whole concept of Adam Zaman, and we don't know if there's Zaman to order Adam come. So how do we ever give him a thought?
That's a warning.
That's why the Gemara.
You can't give a just in the Belgian line, you know.
Right? No, that's why the implication of Abaye was warn them in the course of their test. In other words, you'd have to warn
If you-
every set of witnesses, basically. Be careful that you're telling that they'll start, oh, we were there at such and such a place at such and such a time. And then you interrupt them, the Beis Din would have to, and say, remember that if you're lying, okay,
That's why she said beware.
okay, all right. So what happens? Amar, right? Cross is the pasuk. Mishpat echad yelachem, mishpat hashaveh lekulchem. It's got to be one law to all, one law equal to all of them. Now, going on. So in other words, so that's the place. So we have a problem, just as you raised, Marty, okay, with this issue of how can you say, if you say anyone needs hatra'ah, warning, particularly if it comes to killing them, okay, and this is the case, it doesn't work, right? All right, a new piece. Rav Shisha Berei de Rav Idiamar, he says, Chover b'chavei ronami. Maybe here too we can derive this some sort of answer on the dual transgressions, dual punishment issue. Mamona mishalem umilka lo lake. So he's saying also, as we've seen with Ula, right? Pay the money, but they don't get lashes. They don't get flogging. Mehacha from here. V'chi yinatzu anashim v'nagfo isha hara v'yatzu yiladah. Okay, when two men strive with one another and one causes a miscarriage, all right, in that situation. V'amar Rebbe Elazar. And he says as follows. What are we talking about? All right. Right. Right.
Not shoes.
B'matzut shebamita hakatuv b'medaber. That it's dealing with a situation of death is what the pasuk is talking about. Okay, in other words, the advanced warning is required vis-a-vis murder, and maybe there's a parallel to the fact of an advanced warning required for an injury. And this is our example of the injury, okay? That when two men are fighting and the woman tries to get in between and she gets struck, that's an injury that causes the miscarriage, okay?
It's her fault.
Well, that's maybe, but that's a separate issue. Tichtiv v'imason yihiyeh v'natata nefesh tachat nefesh. And if harm occurs, you give, right, nefesh tachat nefesh, one soul for the other. Hechi dami, how is that possible? Idelo atru bei, if it did not occur in that situation, amai miktal. Why would a person be killed? Elapshita, it's obvious, the atru bei, that it occurred there to him, umutra the davar chamur. Okay, and in this case, we're saying that it is, I want to put it, directed, guided, I don't want to use the word permitted, say, to go with this more stringent view, have mutra the davar hakal. Okay, and with her, it's the more lenient position, right?
If you give a hasra, a warning for a davar chomer from
Right.
Misa, that hasra would help for
A more
mouth,
lenient
a more
situation,
lenient with mouth.
situation as well, right? It's basically a kal v'chomer, okay? But you're going from the chamor to the kal,
Right.
a
So-
kol shekain.
So
right,
a warning
situation.
for a more
A warning for the murder should certainly apply regarding a warning for an injury.
You go back, that's going back.
Yeah, it's like more like a kol shekain, okay, than a kal v'chomer. Kal v'chomer, we go from lesser to more stringent. Kol shekain is we're going from the more stringent down to the less stringent. Okay, all right. So what happens here? Va'amar Rachmana, says the Torah, right? V'lo yiyeh ason and no sheyeh onesh. Okay, if there's no harm here, what about the person being punished? And it was therefore they would not get flogged,
if there was
but
no
they would have to
death,
pay.
they would still pay.
They would still pay. Matkif la Rav Ashi, and Rav Ashi challenges us. Mimai de mutra ledavar chamor have mutra ledavar hakim. On what's the basis that you could claim that where you give warning for a more stringent item, that could apply also the requirement, I'll say for the moment, of a warning for a lesser item? Dir malo have. Maybe you can't argue that way. Okay? Im timselo mar hai, if you say that, mimai demita chamura. If that's the case, why are we going to say that death might be a more stringent punishment as we go on? Right?
Right.
All right. Dilma malkot chamur. Maybe we might argue that death is not more stringent than malchus. Okay, although we might logically wonder about that. Okay. All right. Da'amar Rav, as Rav says, Ilmale nagdua lechananya Mishael v'Azariah. Were it such that they had flogged Hananya, Mishael v'Azariah, palchu l'tzalma, they would have worshipped the idol. Okay, remember the story there, Hananya, Mishael, right? They went through the fiery furnace. Nebuchadnezzar sent them. That's the story. Amarle Rav Sama Berei the Rav Asi, the Rav Ashi. What did he say? Va'amre la Rav Samra Berei the Rav Ashi, the Rav Ashi. Another says it was Rav Sama, who was the son of Rav Ashi, said to Rav Ashi. V'lo shane lach bein haka'ah sheyesh la katzva la haka'ah she'em la katzva. Right? Are you saying that there's no difference between Malchus, where there is a limit, okay, where it's clearly only 39, okay, versus a flogging or a Malchus, she'em la kitzvah, which is done for lack of compliance to the rabbis, where there is no limited number of how many Malchus they can get.
What if somebody dies from too many malchuses?
Okay, that's a good question. Okay, when we get the Sanhedrin, we'll have to deal with that. Right? No,
That's
no.
why you have,
Okay. Right. Arba'im chaser echad. 39 malchus is the punishment that the court can give somebody up to that amount and no more.
No, I know, but I thought you said that they could give unlimited malchuses.
For if they didn't comply with court, right? Then they could give more, right? They could give them 10, then they can give them another 10, then they can give them a 15, right?
doesn't apply to
It doesn't apply today, no.
Thankfully.
All right, Matkifla Rav Yaakov Minahar Pekud. So now we have a new voice, Rav Yaakov Minahar Pekud. That's his location. Ha Nechel Rabbanan. That's understandable regarding the rabbis. The Amrei Nefesh Mamash. Why? Because we're talking about the person in reality, in that situation. Ela the Rebbe the Amar. But in regards to Rebbe who said Mamon, that there's payment, my Ikalamemar, what are you going to say there? Ella, Amar Rav Yaakov mina harpakod mishmei de Rava, in the name of Rava Mehacha. From here, we'll say as follows, this pasuk. Im yakum v'hitalech b'chutz, al mishanto v'nakah hamakeh. If the person is able to get up from his wound and proceed, okay, rise again, all right, and walk, it's on his staff, okay, one does not give malchus, right? What happens? V'chit, right?
Right.
V'chi ta'aleh al da'atcha shezeh mahalech b'shuk v'zeh neharag. What do you think you're going to be of such an opinion that this one should be able to get up and walk around, and the one who committed the beating, okay, he's going to get killed? Is that what you're saying? Ela milamed shechovshin oto. But what do we mean? We say as follows: we imprison him. V'imate, and if the person who was wounded or hurt dies, katlinanle, then we kill him. V'ilomit, and if the person who was wounded, beaten, whatever, shivto yitain v'rapo yirapeh, then we follow the practice that he must pay his shevet, his loss of time for work, and his medical expenses. Okay.
This is the first time you see imprisoning somebody? You said lashes?
Okay. Well, I think what he's trying to
In other
suggest.
words, you don't get lashes, you pay the money.
Okay. In other words, what if there's a question? Since the person, we don't know if the person's going to heal. So what are you going to do? You're not going to carry out the punishment immediately. So temporarily, you imprison them.
Right.
Okay? So that's only a stopgap, I would call it.
Something in between
Right.
saying.
Okay? Because then,
20 hours and you go-
okay, well, because you didn't come to a decision. You don't know what the situation is. Right? Okay. All right, so what happens? Hechi dami. All right, so here the Gemara wants to clarify. How is that possible? Idelo atruve, right? Amai miktil. If it didn't happen to him and there,
You
why-
didn't warn them before.
right? He didn't warn him. Okay, right? What happens? Amai maktil. Why kill him? Right?
Wasn't warned.
Right? Ela pshita, but it must be obvious. The etrube, that they warned him. Umatra ledavar chamur, mutra ledavar hakal. And if you warn for something where there's a stringency, like the death penalty, then likewise one should warn also for a more lenient situation as
That
well.
warning would also
Right?
help and for the
Right.
more lenience.
Va'amar rachmana, says the Torah, however, shivto yitain v'rapo yirapeh. Okay, and that's where the Torah says then that you pay his loss of time and his expense, medical
Right,
bill.
and you don't get lashes.
Right, you wouldn't get the lashes, but there it's very clear that you would only have the one punishment, which was the payment in that case. Okay, so that would be a possible answer to our question: what happens in a situation where a person has done an act and would be subject to both payment and money?
Money.
Okay, this is a possible answer. Okay, now what happens, however? Matkifla Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi challenges. Mimai de mutra ledavar chamur have mutra ledavar hakim. On what basis can you say that a warning for something that's more stringent implies there also can be a warning for something less stringent? Dilma lo have. Maybe that's not the case, says Rav Ashi. Ve'im timtze lomar have. And if you want to say it's possible, mimai demita chamura. On what basis, again, do we say that death is a more stringent punishment? Dilma malkos chamur. Maybe the flogging, the lashes is more stringent. Da'amar Rav, as Rav said, Ilmale nagduha lechananya Mishael va'Azariah, palchu l'tzalma. Were it such that they had flogged Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, they would have worshipped the idol. Amar le Rav Sama b'rei de Rav Asi le Rav Ashi. Va'amre la Rav Sama b'rei de Rav Ashi le Rav Ashi. Others say it was his own son. Right? V'lo shane lach bein haka'ah sheyesh la kitzvah lahaka'ah she'en la kitzvah. Isn't there a difference again, the same question, between flogging where there is a limited number, namely we said the 39, versus flogging where there is no limited number, as in the example of non-compliance for rabbinic thought
It
issue.
just bothers me the thought that if you have unlimited offices, somebody.
Well,
die
the
from it.
point is, let's say the court tells him, gives him an example. You committed that act, okay, and you've been warned not to do it, okay, and so your punishment is 10 lashes. Okay, now the person goes ahead and commits that same act a second time. Okay, now the court warned him, the court punished him. Okay, so now for the second offense of the same act, what are you going to do?
More offices.
More malchus, right?
Oh,
Okay, so that's the point. Right.
When did this stop happening? It doesn't apply today.
No, it doesn't
The
apply.
basic income or the basic income was,
Yeah, I don't know if you could,
When they start
When they-
having this Sanhedrin.
when they stop the Sanhedrin. Okay, right. So what happens? Right, but don't laugh, don't laugh. You have, gentlemen, you have examples into the early Middle Ages where in Spain, the royal authority in Spain allowed a beis din to actually give malchus, or even worse, in Spain in the early Middle Ages. Right, you have halachic sources that show that.
You know what the big punishment was? They had to go with Columbus to the
Not quite. It was a lot worse than that. Okay, all right, so let's try to finish up now, right? How are we doing time-wise? Okay, yeah. Matkif la Rav Midi. And Rav Midi says, Mimaid b'mezid v'nika m'ktala. How do we know that when an act is done on purpose? Okay, and what happens? V'nika, all right, and we say that the person might, okay, survive, the wounded person, that they're different than being killed. Dilma b'shogeg v'nika migalut. Okay, maybe the act was done accidentally. And then what does he become acquitted of? All right, going into galus, kasha, there we have a problem. Okay, a new piece. Reish Lakish Omer, he says, Hi Mani Rabbi Meir. He, according to whom is this Rabbi Meir? De Amar Lokeh U'Mishalem. Rabbi Meir also said, okay, it gets malchus and pays. Rabbi Meir, okay, if that's the case of the view of Rabbi Meir, afilu bitonami, and that's the case, we said, if it was the rape of the daughter also. V'chitema Rabbi Meir loke u'mishalem itle, met u'mishalem lisle. Are we going to say that Rabbi Meir would hold that in some cases you would do malchus and pay, but if the woman was raped and died, that he would only pay? Is that the case? All right, or we wouldn't even have to pay? No, that's not the case. Vahatanya, aren't we taught in the Braita as follows? Ganav v'tavach b'Shabbat. If a person stole an animal and slaughtered it on Shabbos, Ganav v'tavach la'avodat kochavim. He stole an animal and slaughtered it for idol worship. Ganav shor haniskal utvacho. Or he stole a animal that was sentenced to be stoned and slaughtered it. okay, and there's an isur on any benefit from that shor niskal, that animal that has been sentenced to skila, right? Mishalem tashlume arba'a v'chamisha divrei Rabbi Meir. In those situations, Rabbi Meir claims that he has to pay 4 or 5 times, right? V'chachamim potrin, but the sage is exempt. What do we mean the sage is exempt? Okay. Ha itmar Allah. And about this, the following was said. Amar Rabbi Yaakov, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. In the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Va'amre la Amar Rabbi Yirmi, Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. In the name of Reish Lakish. Rabbi Avin v'Rabbi Eli. The kol chavurta mishmei de Rabbi Yochanan Amre. And they all say in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. B'toveach al yedei acher. That in that situation, we were saying it wasn't the same person who did the stealing. That one person did the stealing and somebody else did the slaughtering. V'chi zeh choteh v'zeh mitchayev, asks the Gemara. This one sins, and this other one becomes obligated. He committed the transgression. Amar Rava, Amar Rachmana. Says Rava, according to the Torah, utvacho o machro, or if he slaughters it or sells it. Ma mechira al yedei acher, av tvicha al yedei acher. The same way the sale can be done by another person, so the slaughtering could be done by another person. Okay.
If you hire someone to kill someone. Now, really. Present situation,
Both could be found guilty, right? All right, so what happens? The Bei Rabbi Yishmael Tana. The Academy of Rabbi Yishmael taught as follows. Oh, it says, or lerabot et hashaliach, to include the one who was the representative. All right, that's both, right? Rabbi Chizkiah Tana, and Rabbi Chizkiah taught it, tachat lerabot et hashaliach. If you use not just the language oh, but they also in place of tachat, that includes the one who sent. Mad kifla mar zutra. Mar zutra challenges. Mi ika mide de ilu avad ihu lo mechaye. Is there some activity or a thing where someone has done a deed and they're not held responsible, guilty? Va'avid shaliach umechaye. And the one who sent
if he
them.
makes a messenger, sends
Right.
a message to do that deed, the messenger is not chayav.
And the messenger is
How
not
could that
chayiv
be?
and not
If
possible,
he's
right?
chayav, then the messenger
Should be high chayiv too, right? Ihu lav mishum de lo mechayev. The fact that he is not to be held responsible. Ela mishum de kam le b'derabba minei. But rather we say that it's the one who has the higher punishment, or the more stringent punishment. Ibetoveach al yedei acher. And if it were a situation that the animal was slaughtered by another, mai ta'amahu de rabbanan de patre. What then is the reason of the rabbis that they would make the person exempt? Man chachamim. Which sages? Stay tuned tomorrow and we'll see. Okay.
Yeah, you did a beautiful job.
Uh,
I'm trying to keep the